What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream.
Oh, seriously, salty science podcast.
All right. How are you guys doing today?
Doing well.
I am wonderful.
Excellent. So today we thought it'd be fun to talk about reefing in the house with a spouse and kind of what goes along with that, certain tips to keeping the peace or getting your significant other into the hobby for a more enjoyable experience. So
Plus, it's kind of Dr. Seussy.
that is very true. Spouse in the house. Okay, so first question starting out. Do either of you guys have your significant other into reef tanks?
Into reef tanks?
Yeah. Are they into
No.
it? Are they supportive of it? Are they like, oh, it's there? Do they enjoy looking at it? Like, what's the level of involvement?
It's a love-hate thing for me. They love seeing the tank.
Mm-hmm.
And hang on a second. I am
Loading, buffering.
sorry, lost my headphones there for a minute.
Okay.
It's a love-hate thing because, of course, they love the tank. And when I think my wife isn't paying attention, she's like, hey, what happened to that wrasse? Or don't. I knew you bought that. So, I saw it. I just decided not to say anything. But they love it. But I think they are annoyed at how much of my time it takes up.
Fair points. All right.
My husband is very supportive, but he does not get involved with it at all. And part of that is just like us having separate identities, like entities. Like he has things he enjoys doing, I have things I enjoy doing, and trying to keep like those separate. Though I mean, we do things together still also, but having those separate times apart is is good for a relationship. So yeah, he shows up, he likes to look at it, he knows more about it than I would think, because occasionally he'll bust out with talking about Kalkwasser. He still doesn't know what phosphate and nitrate is, but some of the things has soaked into his brain.
On that note, super funny, but whenever I say Kalkwasser, my wife is always like, Cowcasters across the house.
That's funny.
Yeah.
What about you, Dev? Because you got a lot of stuff. So
Yes, I do. Overall supportive. Not the whole, as long as I don't leave my reef stuff all over the house is probably one of the biggest things. So I think one key thing to happy spouse is cleaning up your mess and not leaving a mess everywhere. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was about how much time it takes to spend on it and maintain it. I know on my first couple of years, I spent tons of time on my tanks. Like I was constantly buggering with it. And now that I have a lot of it automated, I spend a lot less time, which is nice. So for the most part, like my dosing model things, I can look at an app and here's my levels, tweak from my phone. And so that's definitely freed up my time, and that helps. Now I've definitely learned my lesson from using utensils and tools that are not supposed to be used for fish tanks. I know that's probably a big one for many people.
So my wife, because my previous job, I traveled a lot for work. And I have to say, apart from water changes, my wife will do almost anything except clean the skimmer. Like the tank could be dying. She's not cleaning the skimmer. Like the tank would have to die before the skimmer. It's gotten to the point now where no matter where we go and there is a horrible smell, they're like, Dad, did you clean the skimmer? And I'm like, we're like in the supermarket. You smell something. So it's the family is very much involved, probably more involved than I thought.
What on that note, cleaning the skimmer, I'm also obligated to open all the windows.
So my little tip I got from Greg actually is put some Kalkwasser like a teaspoon of Kalkwasser in the skimmer cup every time you empty it. And I think he said that prevents some bacteria from growing. But that works. It doesn't eliminate it, but it makes it smells a lot less, and it works for me because my tank is in my living room. So you can imagine when your skimmer cup is full, it can get smelly. So that tip actually works for me. So when you're cleaning, I go in the bathroom. Now I can close the bathroom, open the bathroom window, and light a candle in there. So hopefully it doesn't.
Yeah, if you got that bathroom air vent, turn it on as well. The calc is a really good tip too. It does cut it down. Another thing, because I put my little like Tupperware container DIY recirculating scrubber, that sucks out basically all the smell because it just cycles out, right? It doesn't really get vent into the room. So that's actually made a big difference. So I don't really notice anything until I actually clean it.
Is there
I
a
don't
fish?
smell mine unless I clean it.
Is there a fish that you think, like one thing that has worked for me is there's a specific fish that my wife loves, and it's her naso.
Yeah.
Now, it's also gotten me in trouble because I only have like a 4-foot tank, 75-gallon-ish. And obviously you can't keep, we know a naso, a fully grown naso gets up to a foot long or more. So I get her a naso. She is really happy for a couple of years. Then when the naso gets too big and I have to take it out, I go to she's mad at me.
Been there.
But I convince her, like, whenever we move, the bigger tank is because, hey, we can keep a fully grown naso. So that's sort of my inkling towards, hey, we need to upgrade because that's her favorite fish, a fully grown naso.
So the wife really liked one of the old hippo tanks that I had, and its name was Dottie. However, it was a terrorist and liked to pick up corals and like rearrange the tank. And she's like, oh, she's interior decorated, it's her house. But then the problem is it would drop those corals onto other corals and they would kill each other. So eventually I traded that hippo tang and I got another one that was a bit smaller. And yeah, that was not a good situation. She's mad at forever. So the new one she refuses to name is the who will not be named.
How long did it take you to get out of the doghouse on that one, Deb?
It still lingers every once in a while. But so that's one thing. So if they pick favorite fish, hopefully it's a small one that can live in your tank forever, or it's an excuse to upgrade. Thoughts?
Luckily, I don't have that problem.
Yeah, that's fair.
My husband, his hobbies are probably grosser than anything in the reef tank, right? Because he's killing animals and catching fish and chopping up fish and stuff like that. So as far as like the gross factor, it doesn't really occur to him. And I'm a biology major, so I think when we posted this question initially and people were talking about things, I was like, never thought about that actually being gross. So that's not a problem I have. My son, he's probably the one who's more of a problem in my household. He does not like how much time my tank takes away from him. Only child, but the tank is like a younger sibling. And there's a couple of fish that he really, really wanted. And like one of the very first gobies that we got, and God, that goby was probably 6-7 inches long before when it died. It was old. Yeah. And he didn't care at all. So he has, sometimes I worry about his lack of attachment to the fish, but he also goes fishing with us. So I don't know. Yeah. I don't know it hasn't been a problem.
Okay. In general, I think it is a good idea to, get them to pick out a fish or get something like at that level of investment in the tank. I think that helps quite a bit too. Another big thing is keeping your tank looking good, especially in your main living room, right? Like keep the glass clean. Don't let stuff build up on it, because if it doesn't look good and it's more of an eyesore, it's more of an issue. Or if it looks pristine and pretty all the time, then it's, more aesthetically living room art and not what is that gross thing in the corner, right? So keeping the tank looking good, I think, goes a long way.
Just to piggyback on that, Dev, so that's how we kind of did that's how I ended up getting the Red Sea. Because at first, it was kind of, hey, let's get a fish tank. It was more of like a 40 breeder pine stand. But what happened is everyone who comes over immediately goes to the tank. It's right behind me, the lights. So I think after a while with that pine stand you get from Petco, it's just, you can't, after a few splashes, you can't really wipe the salt creep out of it. So it ended up looking really ugly in the living room. So that was what kind of inched us towards doing an upgrade for the Red Sea, because it was a much more polished nicer look. So
Yeah.
yes, one thing I will say that I'm proud of though, is that every time someone comes over and start looking at the tank, my wife is the one that gives the tour. Of course, there's a few jabs in there. It's like, hey, he killed this fish, or he did that, or he killed that coral. But there's some there's a I'm proud of that. I can take those jabs.
Fair trade.
I will say I had a friend come over, and there was, how when the algae is just starting to get on the glass again, and it's not really, you might not necessarily scrape it.
It's got the haze.
Yeah, like just slightly hazy. And she just thought it was the grossest thing ever. And she's like, that just really grosses me out. And I was like, really? And normally I scrape it before I have company over, but she comes over. She's a close friend, so she comes over pretty regularly, which is why she was probably comfortable telling me it grosses her out. But it was at a point that I didn't even quite notice it yet, right? Mm-hmm. And she was like, what is that all over the glass? And I was like, oh, it's just like some algae. And she's like, oh, that just is really gross to me. And I was like, huh. So it's me being the female and the one who normally does the cleaning. Mm-hmm. I suspect that tank probably stays cleaner than most people's. But it also made me realize how low the tolerance is for someone who's not into it. Mm-hmm. Might be.
Now, is she... Like, I wonder, too, like, is she more, not like a germaphobe, but more of like the clean freak thing? Like, that little bit would bug you?
No, I don't think so. If she's watching, then sorry. But her house, like, is clean, but it's never like everything is put together exactly where it goes. And mm-hmm. So I wouldn't call her a clean freak. There's always, like, a couple of dirty dishes in the sink. But, like, for someone who doesn't know the biology stuff, right, it's the tolerance level of what is okay and not okay is really low. Mm-hmm. Or might be really low, which kind of surprised me. It was just like a thing in the back of my head.
I will say, though, that one of the funnest things people do is they love playing with the algae. So much so that I have to hide it sometimes. Or when kids are coming over. Yeah, because everyone, the kids, the adults, I don't know, it's a great feeling. Like, they just start playing with it. I've gotten...
Wait, the algae scraper or the algae...
Algae scraper.
Magnet.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I thought you said algae. I was like, what algae?
Yeah, the magnet. It's just, I don't know, Dev. It's
like I have to do that too. I have to hide it.
Do you have, you have the same, especially kids, like immediately.
A couple of weeks ago, one of our wives or one of the family friends was over, and there's, I had the two little fishies algae clip on the side, and she's like, all over the glass. I'm like, do you know what that is? She's like, to clean the glass. I'm like, no, that's old algae. I like pulled the magnet on the corner. I'm like, here you go. But yeah, it's true though. They always go for it.
Yep, especially the floaty ones now are cool because they separate it. Like, oh,
yeah,
it reattaches. End up splashing water because that I'm using the Tunzi on the inside, mm-hmm. and then the hammerhead on the outside. So it's a really strong,
I need to do that.
Ooh. So when it reconnects with a rimless tank, it's like splashes water everywhere, but it's still like a cool feeling. Everyone loves it. Mm-hmm. I've had people, like friends where I've told them to wash their hands and they pet the end and they be like, ooh, it's squishy. I don't know. It's just because the NEM tank is really shallow, so it's not a big. It's a lagoon tank, so it's not like a only a few inches, but
it's the touch tank. Reefing with those touch tank.
I've had tanks in my house, not always reef tanks, but for probably the entire time I've been married. So like 12, 13 years. And my father-in-law has never touched it. And I noticed last time I have a hawkfish that he just was completely enamored by. And for whatever reason, he decided to clean the glass for the first time ever. And I wasn't there. I was not here. I came back and noticed it. And I was like, huh. So there was like random streaks through it that I had not done. And you know how the scraper side like comes to the glass like this? Mm-hmm. Well, it was the opposite way. And one of my acros that was up on a frag rack had got, like most of it had got knocked off broken off the plug. And I was like, oh gosh. So it's like one of those things that I normally hide the scraper because I've had issues with people scratching the glass in the past with it. but never occurred to me to do it with him. And I'm like, all right. So every time we have guests, we should hide those.
You have a little lockbox for your scraper.
Yeah.
The problem is if there's a snail or something on the edge of it, then it's like danger zone, right?
Yeah.
That's the risky part. Like I only use the flipper, which only the blade, but snails like to hide in that little crevices, and some of them sleep. Like I have a little stroma snail or whatever it is, or the ones where the flesh wraps around the shell, money cowrie. And that like I love sleeping in that little groove. So I'm like, can't clean the glass today. It's a snail on it. It's like,
Yeah. Well, mine has Coraline and like verminted snails and everything like on the back side, right?
Yeah.
And that was the side that was towards the glass, and I'm like.
no.
I didn't see any scratch marks, but I know, right? I didn't look very closely because I didn't want to like be upset about it. But yeah, that the scrapers are a concern.
That's serious business.
Isn't that where most of us get our scratches from? Like I used to
Probably
leave the blade, you know, the Tunzi one, just leave the blade out of the water, thinking like, okay, the blade's not in the water, like it's cool, just leave. But then one day I saw a scratch happen, and you're right, it was like a stomatilla or chiton or something on the back end, and I don't know why I decided to go left to right, and I went, and you know when something's happened in slow motion, and you're dragging it, and you sort of drag it, instead of your brain telling you have to drag it 2 inches, it's like stop. You're like, there's a scratch.
Is it really there? Is it really? It is.
Yes. Oh, then idiotic me kind of pulled it back to see if this is really what's scratching. So there is like that's
how I got my very first scratch on my very first tank. Was a neighbor's kid who was too young to be running around by himself. He was like 4 or 5. Ran into the house, saw the magnet, and went straight down into the sand and right back up. And I mean, I think I'd had that tank for like 2 weeks. And hurts. Giant scratch across it, and of course that was where algae always grew, and I was like, it hurts.
Do you have duplicate of everything for like separate from, because I think like everything I use for the tank, like if my wife sees I use it for the tank, she's like, that's yours, it's not going back in the kitchen. So let's say I get some corals, and one time I needed to cut a coral bag, you know, just hey, I couldn't find my scissors or something, and I used it to cut, like, she's like, nope, that's yours. So I have separate, like my wife doesn't want any mix-up, where I even have a separate, like, you know, old toothbrushes, where, like, you'll keep old toothbrushes around to maybe after you've soaked something in vinegar, you use toothbrush. Yep. Yeah, there's, like, different brand toothbrushes, because she doesn't want to be any contamination mistake at all.
Now,
so
have you used kitchen supplies for the fish tank, and have you gotten in shit for it?
There's a little trick.
Dev, I think I want to stay alive today, so it's one of those where you wink if you're in trouble. No.
Okay.
No.
Never.
All the winks.
Yeah.
So this is what I do. I actually take some like little washi tape and wrap around like my toothbrushes or whatever that I'm using for the tank. So that way there is no way to confuse it whatsoever. So.
No, it works. I draw a little like fish on it with just like a Sharpie or something. I'll draw a little thingy on it. But
the Sharpies will eventually like wipe away though, right? So,
they can.
Or at least in my experience they have.
So if you have a different brand and a different color, so for instance, yellow is yellow scissors. I got yellow polka dotty scissors. Like you cannot ever mix that up with something.
Scissors you could lose your head over scissors. I've used scissors that I wasn't supposed to. It's a dangerous game. Still do. In the background, still do. So I've learned my lesson to not touch any scissors.
Yeah, I cannot do anything. So the kitchen is off limits for anything. Like it doesn't matter what it is. If it's an emergency or something's happening, like the kitchen is off limits for anything fish related. So that is, if someone is asking me what is my number one tip for tonight, like that is it. Like
stay out of the kitchen and don't touch scissors. That will keep you alive.
It's probably a good thing though, right? Like
It is.
With me, I have used kitchen things before, and like the epoxy. Have you ever, the epoxy for
Yep.
the coral frags? And I used a knife in the kitchen to cut it, and I never got the epoxy off the blade. Right, so I ended up going and getting a little X-Acto knife to cut them with, and so even if it's not for sanitary reasons for a spouse or someone else you're living with, it's just the salt water and all this stuff, the epoxy, whatever it is, it has such a tendency to destroy that stuff, and that stuff is not cheap.
Yep.
Very true.
I think I used Brandy. I don't remember if it was vinegar or nail polish remover, and got something. I think I was doing something with. I was doing an aquascape, and I think it was dry rock, and I needed to stuff something in, like epoxy, and I think I had glue on it too. And I think I used nail polish remover.
Yeah.
And it came off?
Acetone.
It's been on there for like 2 years. Will it come off now?
Maybe. So acetone has worked because I've accidentally gotten super glue on my stand one time, and I believe it was acetone that I used, and I got it off. I was like, whew. So it would have drove me nuts if there's like this bumpy glob of super glue on the side.
Yeah.
I was laughing in the comments. Who was it? Raul. I had to decommission a strainer from the boss. It was perfect for GFL cleaning. I asked forgiveness after. Keyword decommission, aka it's never allowed to see the kitchen again.
And just the last couple of days, I've really been thinking of going back, like running ozone again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not for the water clarity properties, is I get no fish smell at all when I'm running ozone on my tank. There is no, like, sometimes you're feeding, and so whenever I turn off my pumps for some kind of feeding, you get the fish smell, and that's kind of my cue, like, okay, your carbon needs cleaning. But when I'm running ozone, you get no fish at all.
That is actually one of the big reasons I run it as well. If you don't, like, if you have that oceany smell in your tank, where the ozone will eliminate like 95% of that.
Yeah, so that's what I'm thinking. I don't want to run ozone. I've been trying to decomplicate my tanks, and I've just sort of given up.
Lies.
Because, hey, you know what happens?
Okay, giving up, that's truth.
You take, and hey, this was because my wife said my tank is too complicated, so I took it off, and everything went to the closet. But once over the course of the last year, one by one, things just end up coming out of the closet. That'll be cool to put that back. So, but I think ozone. I'm thinking of ozone for that reason, because there's no fishy smell.
Mm-hmm. No, and exactly right. And if there is fishy smell, that's usually something that's could come up as a complaint and make the hobby not as enjoyable. So having a nice crystal clear, non-oceany smelling tank is a good thing.
I don't know if I've gone nose blind to it, but I don't think my tank has a smell.
You're probably nose blind. Happens to the best of us after a while.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, if you go outside to the fresh air for a while and you come back in, do you smell anything, or you're like, no, it's perfect? Might be good.
No.
But if you run carbon, I mean, that will do a similar job if you replace it, monthly or whatever. Or if you run ozone, then same thing. That will help eliminate and break down any of those organics that cause that oceany scent after a while.
Yeah. There is just no smell at all with ozone. So I think, that's why I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
Yeah, that and water clarity. So huge fan of ozone. I haven't done it on this tank yet, but I should. It's sitting on the floor in here somewhere. It's on my to-do list.
Someone said, Fernanda Souza, he mentioned food blender. I have a story about that. So I make my own fish food. And my wife helps. But she only helps. Well, let me not say it like that. She assists me. But the first time I did it where I didn't want her help, man, I made such a mess. Imagine like you blending up fish, squid, scallops, clams, all over the kitchen. And then, just me, not knowing where stuff was, and I'm touching everything. You can imagine our kitchen smelled like fish for a few days after, just fish, because I touched everything. We basically had to wipe every surface with bleach. So on subsequent times when I'm making fish food, she helps. But I think it's to keep me out of trouble. So now I have my own, those baking trays. I use the throwaway ones to make sure there's no cross-contamination. I have my own food processor for fish food. I have my own everything. There's a whole set of utensils for
everything for the tank.
Food.
That's wise.
For making fish food. Like my food processor is different. Just when it's finished, I clean it, I put it in a box, and I put it away. There's no even any way someone can stumble upon it like, let me do something with it. No, it's packed away.
Nice.
So I'm not sure if this is, again, like my biology, like mental block, but I've never made fish food, but in my head, the way I believe it works is that you buy food that is for human consumption, right?
Yes.
What's the difference between putting that stuff, if you were going to cook with it, versus making fish food with it?
If you could answer that for me, like, I think we'd solve
Okay.
99, because I don't know. Like, to me, it's just fish. Like,
It's all the same.
Hey, we go to the store together. Like, she buys shrimp to cook, and I buy the cheapest stuff, or I ask the guy, like, do you have anything that's expiring? So we literally buy seafood from the same place. So if you can explain that to me, like, I would love to know the answer.
Okay, so this is one of those things when your spouse says it's a problem, you just accept that it's a problem.
Or you make a nice, lovely fish or crab dinner the same night, and then there's this fish in the air, and it all gets swiped away with the delicious dinner.
Yeah, because in my head, I'm like, I don't, like, it never occurred to me to not rinse stuff out in the sink until we had this thing that we put up, right? And people are like, oh, that's gross. And I'm like, really? Okay, I didn't realize it. Like, my tongs that I use for getting the stuff out of the tank, people told me in the comments about this, that was gross to rinse that off in the sink. So now I'm rinsing it off in the bathroom.
Okay.
And so I didn't know if, like, this mixing food thing was also something that just hadn't clicked with me, or
I have a question. Now, if you have, like, beakers or certain things that you've used for fish stuff, is it gross to put it in the dishwasher?
I do.
I have.
Oh, he's looking around. He's looking.
I have an official list.
Oh, you have a list?
Yes. We'll get to this one in a second. Apparently she was listening and gave me her tip list.
Brandon, like, I cannot even, like, if I mean, I sneak and do it sometimes, but I cannot even, like, when I've finished working in the tank, I can't even wash my hands in the sink.
Really?
Like, that is a big no-no. I do it sometimes in a pinch because I'm like, hey, I'm going to drip all the way to the, whatever. But, yeah, that's no-no. So maybe I'm on the other end of the extreme.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know, because I've done so much with, like, bacteria and stuff, right? I'm like, bleach will kill it, and, like, some Dawn will kill it, and I don't know if that's why it was a legitimate question, like, is there something that's gross about that I'm not recognizing other than just a person's personal preference? Like, my dad doesn't do blood.
Could be. I mean, in my mind, anything that goes in the dishwasher is dirty and comes out clean, so it's irrelevant. But I've been banished from putting beakers and stuff in there, which
I saw Milev's video. I think we've all seen it, where when he was reviewing the Nio skimmers, right? And he was cleaning the thing, what looks like a sink. And my wife just walked in through the living room and she's like, like, he's not, is that the sink where he cooks? He's cleaning the skimmer in the sink. And it's like, he is forever in the doghouse now. Like, I'm like, you don't know if that's his. She's like, no, because he has spices beside it. So that's his. So yeah, that's a no-no.
okay.
The Lucent Fish said vegetarian spouse. I totally get that, right? Like totally would not mix the two. And I guess I have a wood cutting board that I never put meat on. That's only for vegetables. And I have plastic cutting boards that are only for meat. No vegetables ever go on. So I get that side of it. That makes sense
So
to me.
do you have a fishy one for only fishy stuff?
No, but I don't think I really cut any. I've never made my own food, so
That's fair.
I've never needed it.
I usually just get mice and I'll just break it up in the bag and like smack it a bunch until it's a bunch of chunks. I just grab those.
I do that too. Yeah,
Okay.
that's what I do.
I have one. I have one for fishy,
Okay.
for food processing fishy. Yes, that I cut my fishy stuff on. Yes.
Okay, so I have an official list of recommendations from the wife. Make sure your hobby doesn't become disruptive to the rest of the household, i.e. having buckets, hoses, supplies everywhere. Disruptive. Solution. Designate a specific area for these things. Inform the household when you will be doing bigger changes that will take over spaces. Have a time frame so others can plan around it. Put stuff away after you're done. This is an important one. If what you will do will be a stinky mess, take steps to mitigate this. Open windows, put down a tarp. If you live in the same space, the less disruptive, the more enjoyable. Solid points.
I think that's the case for anything, though,
It
right?
is any hobby, yeah.
Not just reefing. Like,
Yeah.
if my husband's working on a carpentry project and he leaves his tools out, it drives me bonkers. I'm like, put it away.
Mm-hmm.
And the same goes for him. Like, I like to do puzzles and stuff, and if I don't have a puzzle out for a while, it starts to annoy him. So I think that's just like being respectful.
100%. Any hobby, right? You know, clean up your mess. Don't leave a disaster over. Because even though it's like, get distracted, something else happens, right? It's that stuff that's going to linger and have resentment or not like something about it. So for sure, just keep the space a happy, enjoyable, communal space. It's definitely a big one.
Because I am a mess when it comes to water changes, because it's like it's apartment, so you pack everything out. You have a bunch of buckets, you have hoses, you have to unwind everything. So I don't. That first point, Dev, I'm terrible at. Like, I have stuff everywhere, and I just take a long time to, like, I get up in the morning and I have my water mixed the night before. I'm like, I'm going to do this water change and be finished before everyone gets up.
Yeah.
And then I start watching videos, and then I start doing something, and then it just becomes like a whole day thing where people are like tripping over RODI wires going from the kitchen sink to
on that note, if I do plan to do a bigger water change, I don't do it very often, once in a while, I'll have that like 35 gallon or 50 gallon, whatever the big brute can is. And then the night before, you got to fill it with RDI. So it's the next day. And then you got to have a pump in there, mix salt in the morning. And then, eventually you do it. So it does take a little bit of time. Now, automating water changes has definitely reduced the frequency of that. But every once in a while, it still happens.
Sorry, I'm just loving the comments about just having a second kitchen for the fish, and then Shelly said, just have a second house for the fish.
I've suggested that, and my wife says, then we'll never see you.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So I've also suggested a fish room, and she's like, yeah, then we won't ever see you. Because you just spend all the time there. She's like, at least now we can say, okay, do this, hurry up. But yeah, she said, we'll never see you.
Yep. So, okay, that's another thought. So Gold Slinger, I wouldn't be in the hobby if it weren't for the bulling method, not doing water changes, period. So, I mean, not doing them is one way to have less mess, or automating them if you still want to do them. But
so
your point first, Brandy. You go first.
I have a little basket, and I think it's in the bathroom right here that let me see if it is. And like, it's right here. So it's a cute little basket. And my Python and my C-shape pump that like goes down to nothing, whatever that pump is called, goes in there, and then that goes on a shelf in the garage, and it makes it super, super easy to clean it up, and it looks really cute. So that's something to consider, is containers that don't look junky. That's a big plus. Even tell your wives to go buy a container that doesn't look junky. And I also I got this idea from BRS. Those reels that
the hose reels?
Yeah, thank you. The hose reels, that's a great way to do the water changes. And then that way all you have to do is pull on it a little bit and it automatically retracts back in and you don't have to wrap it up. And it makes it easier to pull in and out if you need to.
And I will say, like, I know, like, on social, like Instagram, sometimes we've been having this debate about, like, budget equipment versus my stuff has to look good in the living room. It just has to. Like, I think in a perfect world, like, my wife would love if we have those Kessels 360s with the little, just the one mount coming over. Like, that would be her. Or maybe, like, something like, I'm thinking, like, the ATI Stratton, like, that little thing.
Minimalistic.
Like, that would, yes, that would be awesome. But there has to, I'm not saying I'm the best at it. And probably if you look at my wall, there's probably, like, you can see all the Ecotech controllers.
We can't see you, you're blurry.
It's all blurred. You got your fake blur.
But there's probably so many, as you change stuff, like so many holes. But there has to be a level of, you know, aesthetics taken when it's in your living space. Like, it can't just be like, it needs to be like a Red Sea, doors closed. I had Advanced Acrylics made me like a nice custom ATO container that fits in the corner. You know, there's been times where I tried making my own controller board, like that didn't work. You know, I have Radeons now, and then I kind of put the cables, they come down together, you zip tie them together. So I've seen stuff you do, Dev, where you even go as far as painting like the Voss models, like that was cool. I'm not that creative, but there needs to be at least some level of, this looks good.
Yeah. Well, for me, at least, like the main tank, right? It's like the living room art, right? It's the middle of my kitchen house area. Like, it has to look good, right? It's not even an option to be like ghetto. So it has to be pretty. Like, the one in my office isn't quite as pristine, but it's still super. Like, I've, you know, take time to zip tie the wires. Like, in my light bar, there's no wires hanging down, right? Like, I still try and make it like as crisp and clean looking as possible. And even like other note, I did a terrarium, and I was like, I had my other buddies in a reef tanks build me a custom shelf to wrap around it, so it like so fits. Good. Thank you. So it like fits in with the room, and it all ties it in. So it goes a long way just keeping stuff clean.
Well, it's a matter of peace, also, right? Like, this was something that I'm normally super cluttered and crazy, like I never really cared about it, and I read something that was about how disorganization in your environment can make your mind disorganized. And when you clean up the clutter, your brain has like one less layer of cognitive load it has to consider. So by having things organized and clean, it's like one less thing that your brain has to process.
Makes sense.
Wow. I feel like you are steering into my soul.
Has she inspired your soul?
What you said, we were talking, I mentioned this a little before we started, with the stream started, but when you talk about like everything is framed out, my friends in the UK, German, Dutch reefers, like their tanks are just more a part of their living space on average than what we do here in America. Like, their tanks are like the minimum they'll have, like I think in the UK, Germany, is like a Red Sea reefer. That is the minimum.
Solid.
But a lot of times it'll be framed in. It's well thought out in the living space. The filtration will be thought out. Like, have you seen the tanks that, like, I know he visits the best tank, but Sea Friendly Reef, like those tanks are just so well thought out, so well done, so pristine. So I think they just do a better job of just planning and just building, getting custom cabinets. Their cabinetry is just, I get jealous sometimes.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not saying we don't do that in America. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the average tank in the UK, Germany, the Netherlands is just, there's no Petco where you can go pick up a 40 breeder and just have like a regular fish tank. There's not that.
If it's in your man cave or your basement, your garage, and you just mess with it, I mean, by all means, like, go for the ghetto. But if it's in your main living space, like, keep it pristine.
Yep.
Yep. So Farm Frags, how about how loud your tank is? That is a big one for me. I am like OCD about making my stuff as quiet as possible, like to the extreme. So yeah, I'm definitely in camp. Make your tank ultra quiet.
My tank is dead silent, except for my skimmer, which
Yeah.
needs to be replaced. You wouldn't even know. Like I have a little water fountain for my pets that bubbles over. Otherwise, the cats don't drink water, and it's louder than the tank.
Nice.
The
Makes me
loudest
happy.
things are, so at night when my it's about 7 o'clock here, 7:41 here. So about 8, 9 o'clock when I'm watching TV, everything needs to be silent. So the loudest thing is actually my Nio skimmer, because I think it's like the one non-DC pump I have.
Yeah, they're
actually
AC.
my project, no, I have a maxi jet, and actually my project I was doing this week was taking that maxi jet, and you know those OXO silicone pads, because a lot of times when you have AC pumps, when it makes noise, it's vibrating. So I took that sucker and I wrapped it and zip tied. It's just a big blob of like silicone you're seeing, but I zip tied
Did it
the
work?
heck out of it. So yeah, because there's no vibration now. It's not vibrating against anything. I wish I could have done this by just using silicone tubing to the reactor, but I've had leaks with that in the past. I still want to do push connect.
You know what? Okay. With the silicone tubing, a super interesting thing I found. On my skimmer, my Nios 220, to the top of my cup for my thing, I had a chunk of just like the regular, whatever the clear tubing is. And at one point I changed it to the silicone tubing and it was actually louder. I don't know why, but I can hear the sucking sound louder through the clear silicone tubing than I could through the normal vinyl tubing, which was really weird. Like that's not something I expected. But
Do you think it wasn't
there
like a
pressure
tight
building
seal?
up?
Yeah, a tight seal.
it's pretty
Not a tight
snug.
enough seal.
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm gonna buy another chunk next time to the hardware store and just replace it back and see if there's a difference. But yeah, it's just the weirdest thing. I'm like,
Put some like Dawn dish detergent around it and spray some water on it and see if bubbles form.
yeah, I'll try it. I'm curious, but it was just so bizarre. I'm like, why is this hose louder? It was weird,
That's weird.
but it's the one that the air is getting sucked through. I could just hear the louder through it. Super
My
bizarre.
My Alcatronic is my loudest device when it's testing.
fair.
First, it was just sitting on the dry area of the Red Sea, and it was really loud. Now, Greg said he hung his on his wall, and he said it's not that loud. So I actually took some of that silicone tubing and just rested on it. And I'm not saying it's dead quiet, but yeah, a lot of times with the pumps, it's just vibrations. Maybe it's touching something.
Yeah.
But yeah, quiet, especially at night. What is he? Oh,
Panic in the disco.
especially at night when I'm sitting down to watch TV, like things need to be quiet.
No, I agree.
That's not something I get during the day when life is like, I live in New York City. There's sirens, there's things going on. You're not hearing it during the day, but at night, I need my tank to have like a certain level of I used to have a JBJ chiller. Boy, that thing was like, remember when you used to turn on like your old Dell? Like, so now I have a Teco chiller, which is much quieter. So
I thought I had some nearby. I don't know where I put them, but I just bought some, so I know they're somewhere close. But those little silicone pads you can get for under like hot pots and stuff or grabbing stuff, I put those under my booster pumps too, and it basically eliminates any of the little rattle humminess of them.
yeah, I buy the ones just for drying, but I think they're the same thing. Yeah, I just get them. They're from OXO. I think even BRS sells them. And you just cut them up to whatever you need. Cut them up to whatever size you need.
Yeah. It definitely makes a big difference. Like all those little things add up.
I think a little. People are saying like a little bit of water noise is nice. I do agree. I think a little bit of water, like a little bit of a fountain, can be a little bit relaxing. But I feel like my tank, when it does make noise, it's like not a little trickle that's fountainy and relaxing. So.
And when your drain isn't tuned and it's sucking water, it's not so when you hear the water splashing around a night flow, that's relaxing, but not when your drain or your pump is,
or if your pump is up against the wall and it's going,
Yeah.
or
it sounds like a weed eater.
or sometimes your MP40 is drawing air. You're
Yeah. That's when you got to move it down like half an inch lower in the tank. They're actually back in the day. I know the opposite thing of this one, but I made a 3D print a little plate to sit on top which you could use to stop sucking, but actually I put it on the bottom to like lower the sand dune effect in my old tank that was shallow with it.
And let me say something by Than here, because I'm just curious. He said he needs to find quieter skimmers. Now, it's a facility. I don't think you're there at night, do you? I just imagine there's so much going on during the day. Like, Than is... Yeah, I don't know why. I'm just curious, Than. Like, why would a quieter skimmer, like, make a difference? Because it's a commercial facility, and I imagine with the amount of lights you have...
Because he wants the serenity in there. Yeah, it's peaceful and serenity.
Chill and relax.
All Than's stuff is, like, top-notch. Come on now. Than does it right.
Yes.
Well, the Varios pumps are really quiet, right? So that's why I want the which one has the Varios?
Reef
the Reef
Octopus.
Octopus. That's why I want one of those, because I'm hoping it's going to be a lot quieter than the one I currently have. But my Varios pumps, like, you don't hear them at all. In fact, they're louder when, like, I turn them off and the water comes sucking back down.
Yeah. So we were talking about water change earlier, Dev, and I just want to circle back. So I did try, maybe it's time for me to try auto water changes again, because I did try that one time, but it was before we had better options, and that was with the dose. And the dose for water changes is really, really loud.
Yeah, the dose is great for dosing, but it's not the quietest for water changes. So if it's in your garage, who cares? But if it's in your main living space, you know, if you work at an office, I mean, schedule in the daytime and you'll never notice it. But it's all these little things you got to take in consideration.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here doing meetings because I work here. So, you know, you're sitting here and then, you know, all of a sudden you hear. Yeah.
Now, this is something. I redid my HVAC to make the HC quiet. Yeah, see, sounds hardcore. Now, on that note, with HVAC, for talking about, you know, any fishy smells, other thing I did was put the HRV in the house, and that made a decent difference, right? Because it freshens up the air in the whole house, so it gets rid of any stale air, it lowers your humidity, it's any funkiness, you know, it's bringing fresh air in all the time. So I think that made a difference too. It also helped lower the CO2 in the house, which is better for you, better for the fish tank. It's kind of win-win. I mean, that's a little more extreme because that's, you know, a decent investment, but it definitely made a good difference.
Is the ozone stuff loud?
No, super quiet. Barely hear
super quiet. Yep. I have a question.
Yes.
Now, my biggest issue is, what do you guys do with your supplements? Like, because I have just that's my biggest issue. Like, I just have supplements everywhere. I have stuff here.
Organize it.
Well, yeah. So, I previously had cube shelf stacked up on, not that you can see it, but behind the other side of my desk. So I just got a new shelf made. So my old cube shelves went to the shed, and all my like extra supplements are shafted to the shed now. And I'm just doing a smaller selection in the house of what I'm actually using, not like all my backup stuff. So my extra, my backup, all that stuff's now in the shed, and then I just have smaller amounts on my shed or on my desk for like all this. Like, for instance, I got all these I got to put away now, all my trace elements and whatnot. But
Reefer NYC, sorry, because I know he's local. I thought
to you
when I was
for somebody.
Yes, when
Marcus is local to me.
When I thought I should have called my channel Apartment Reefer, but I think this Reefer NYC. Every time I think about making videos, I'm always like, I think reefing in an apartment is like a unique challenge, and I think like his tank look awesome and cool, and I just think like there are enough of us where I think it would be like awesome. So because I'm lazy and I don't want to make videos, I'm sort of saying Reefer NYC, like that would be cool. If the next time you're doing a reef update, just tell people like where you store your stuff. You know, like what's the challenges of like, you know, how do you do water changes? Like I know for Brandy and Dev, like water changes is an entirely different thing versus you have to unpack everything, then make water. Where do you put your RODI? Where do you empty?
You get a brute container and you put everything in the container when you're done. So you just pull out your one container, all your supplies are inside, take it out, do what you got to do, and then put it back in the container and put it away.
But then you have to.
I'm a big fan of the IKEA cabinets. I'm sure there's an IKEA cabinet that is the size of a brute can that you could roll it into and close a door in. Or you could manufacture one. put two bookcases together and not put the backs on or something. I am confident that there's a way that IKEA could solve that problem for you.
Brute on wheels, lifesaver. If you're filling up somewhere else, definitely. Wheels make it easier. Not breaking your back makes a big difference too, right? The easier stuff is, the more you'll do it, and the quicker you'll be at it. So wheels are your friend.
I'm imagining like two bookcases from IKEA that don't have the bottom on it, so they're just flat. And put them back to back, put a door on it, and roll the Brute can in and out.
Nice. I like it.
I love that idea. My counterpoint to that is I tend to make water. Like if I'm making water the day when I'm using it, that takes a really long time, even though I've done everything I can to. So I sort of always have water made. And then I always have. So when I'm finished doing a water change, I tend to fill up the container. You know what? Maybe that's why I'm doing this stuff all day. Maybe it's just my timing, because when I'm finished doing a water change, I want to fill the water change container again, because I'm always thinking like, suppose there's an emergency. So I want to fill the water, put the salt in, mix it, and then have it sitting there for however. Because I'm always like, hey, suppose I come home and something bad's happening. I need to have at least like 30, 40 gallons on hand to be able to do something, drastic. So maybe it's just I need to plan better. Maybe make the water overnight, put the salt in the morning, do the water change, and then be done with it versus, it being an all-day thing.
Yeah. So Sawyer was saying too, reefing with a toddler is a challenge. Everything has to be locked up, keeping them from grabbing magnets, racks, feeders, hitting the glass. Look at everything. My LFS had this on their cabinet, which I actually thought it was cool because like a baby lock, but all the cabinets have like a little magnety lock thing in it. So you can't open any of the cabinets in the store, and you put a magnet there that unlocks it. I was like, oh, that's actually really cool. So, and nothing was visible, which I'm like, oh, those are sweet.
Pelfrey, so with my kids, Pelfrey, I think it opened. Pelfrey, there were some magnets. Pelfrey, if you guys remember him, he recommended this to me where it's a magnet that keeps the door closed, and you need like a little magnet to unlock it.
Yeah.
Problem is, I lost those after a while. So then I couldn't. I lost the magnet. I lost the two magnets after a while. They couldn't. So but that was really cool. Like that kept everyone out because you couldn't open it without the lock.
Thank you, Goldslinger.
Yeah, dang. Thank you, Goldslinger.
Woohoo!
Thank you. You're too awesome. Those child lock things, the magnet, are super cool. Even for your stand, is normally, even if you don't have kids, it just keeps people and stuff out of them if you don't want them to be, right? And there's nothing visible. It's all like hidden locks, which I think is cool because it keeps the clean aesthetics.
You know what you could do if you lose the magnet?
Use your
floating
algae cleaner.
magnet, take it off, put it against it. You have one always connected to your tank.
That's true. You got backup.
Yeah.
Perfect. I like it. You have kids. Well, actually, the other question is too, if someone's looking after your tank, you'll have to explain your secret lock system.
Which makes you feel like you're, what's his name? James Bond.
Oh, exactly. Sneaky.
Yeah.
There's like electromagnetic locks I looked at before, but the child locks are just way simpler.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a good way to go. Yeah. Colin, hi from Scotland. Welcome.
Hi, Colin.
Hello.
Is that your Scottish accent?
Me?
Yeah.
Or Dev?
Oh, you. I thought that you were imitating like a Scottish accent.
No, I just said Colin. Funny.
Yep.
Okay.
Oh, you have a longer list. There's more on the list?
No, it was only point number 1.
Oh.
Number 2. Do not use fishy equipment for fish stuff. Kitchen supplies are for food, not for your hobby. If you find a need for containers, go to the dollar store and get something specifically for your use. Dollar stores are great places for fish supplies, 100%.
I agree.
Yep.
I get measuring containers. I get glue. That's a fan tip I picked up from Fan. Sometimes I think they look at me crazy when I go in, and I'm grabbing. Especially sometimes they have a sale or a special where you get 3 instead of 2 in the pack. I stack up. So the dollar store glue.
Now, super glue gel. Always buy the gel if you're using it for coral purposes.
My husband has made that mistake before. He went out to get me super glue and came back with the liquid. And I'm like, this doesn't work. It's going everywhere.
You can use it for aquascape because sometimes you need to squeeze it. You squeeze down into certain. You kind of need to catch it quick with like the what do you call it? The thing that lets it dry almost immediately. But I've used
instant.
I actually used I had a few of those. I made that mistake before Brandy, but it came in handy when you're doing an aquascape and you really need to get it into some really tight spots.
That's true.
Drop that glue in. All right. So measuring containers, frag dip containers. I mean, just any type of container with a little handle or measuring is always useful. Tongs, surprisingly. So one time I had a yellow tang jump out where I couldn't reach him. So we're like panicking because he was like in this crack behind the tank. And my wife, who has smaller arms, luckily could get in there. But we had like kitchen tongs literally to like help get him back up and put him back in the tank. Now he's fine, thankfully. But that was like panic situation. So that was the exception. But I think the kitchen tongs were banished after that. But
that reminds me. I think it's Josh. Just set up a tank in his office today, and no, Lakeside Reefer. Mm-hmm. Lakeside Reefer just set up a tank in his office today, and he showed me a picture of it, and I don't know if y'all can see that. And
blurry.
I said you should probably pull it away from the wall a little bit, like far enough away where you can reach your arm back there in case something falls back there, and like an animal or something, like all the way around being able to reach back there. And he was like, oh, it's fine. And then something happened. That he was doing a screw or something fell back there. And he's like, now I have to move the whole thing.
Yep. Okay, now on this one, if you have hard flooring, putting those felt pads in your tank make a big difference. On my old tank, when I had like the laminate flooring, I had like this old chunk of carpet, like a really dense like industrial carpet tile on the bottom of it. And even moving the tank, you drain it halfway down, you could like slide that couple 100 gallons. Like that little bit of slidiness makes a big difference.
Reduce the kinetic friction.
Exactly.
The coefficient of friction.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Show that friction is boss. Huge.
So even for your big tank, Dev, that can happen?
So because I changed my tank that I had prior, like the shallow reef tank at one point, and it sucked, but me and another buddy were able to nudge it, slide it painfully, but we were able to do it. And that was like 150 gallons. Like I drained out 40 or 50 gallons, and then we were able to do it. A brew can worth. So it definitely makes it doable.
Yeah, even if you needed to drain a lot of the water, like that,
just having the ability.
Have to empty, yeah. Interesting.
I use chopsticks.
The company that put up my tank put those on the bottom for that very reason. They're like, we set up so many tanks, and then the person decided it wasn't exactly where they wanted it, so we just started adding these so it would slide a little bit easier.
Yeah, it definitely makes a big difference. All right, what do we got next? If you want your partner to be engaged with your hobby, share the things that you love or find fascinating and why they're important to you. However, don't make it the only thing you talk about. I'm sure most of us over talk about the hobby. And ask them if they like it and what about it they like. Try to incorporate more of that. Okay, so I know in the beginning I definitely talked about the tank and the coral way too much. For sure. So that's a solid point.
Not possible.
Well, for us, it's not possible. But when you talk to someone who doesn't have a tank, apparently it's possible.
I refuse to accept that as a suggestion.
I reject your reality. I know, right?
So sometimes when I'm talking to maybe you, Dev, or like Brandy or like Greg, sometimes I have to take we're discussing issues with our tanks. Sometimes we have to be like, we're not the normal, like we're sitting here on a Wednesday talking about fish tanks for a few hours,
and
there are actually people sitting down listening to us talk about like that we are not the norm here. Yes, we are not. We are not the average reefer. So yes, sometimes it's true. My wife likes See, I'm really see, this is where I think most of my issues come from. I'm really terrible at keeping Euphilia long term. My wife loves Euphilia. You can see where the conflict happens now, where because then I get labeled the coral killer. And then, yeah, I like torches. Like, she loves torches, but...
No, it's good, though. Well, having something mutually interesting for the both of you definitely helps, right? But yeah, it
I
is...
also have a counterpoint to that.
Counter away.
I just... Knowing my husband's desire to talk about things versus my desire to talk about things is making sure if you're talking a lot about something and you want your significant other to listen to it, you should probably do the same thing for them when there's something that's interesting to them that you don't necessarily care about. Like, I don't know, all my planning journals, right? Like, if your spouse likes this kind of stuff,
she loves them.
You should probably try and engage a little bit when they start talking about that kind of stuff. Just making it mutual, right? Like, otherwise they feel the exact same way when you're talking about your tank, and they have it starts to, I could imagine, could start to build some resentment if it's not a both-way conversation.
No, that is a great point, right? Like, it's very healthy for everyone to have their own hobbies, and it is good to be supportive and show interest in each other's, but yes, 100% goes both ways. It's a very nice bullet journal you got there, Brandy.
Thank you. I have a lot of this kind of stuff over here, so yeah. I enjoy it.
Excellent.
That is a very, very good point. Very, very good point.
Yep, that's a solid one. All right, I got one more on the list. Ask for feedback. Listen without offering excuses, and think through any pain points and how it can be resolved. So, it's a good one. Don't just do it. Ask for feedback. Get their buy-in on it. And a big thing I've learned too is if you really want something, you really want to do something, explain why it's important or why you think it is a good thing. Like, don't just have that justification to go with it to kind of have the full picture.
I am really shocked that there was nothing on the list about the budget or spending too much money on the tank.
So funny story on that one. We were out somewhere and we were joking about this later because I went and picked up a bunch of coral. And then my wife so my wife loves art stuff, so she had a bunch of art supplies. And we're coming back, and she's like, "Oh, you never asked about like what I spent and whatever stuff." And she's like, "Yep, you had a bag of coral." None of us said a word. We started laughing later because we're like, we both know we both splurge on like our hobbies, right?
That year, Dev, when you came to Wrap New York, I remember that year specifically because my wife is like, "You're going to Wrap, and you're not spending any money. Like, I hope you can, 2 or 3 days, however you're there, no money. Like, that's the budget."
Yeah.
And we ended up spending like $500 on fish, and so I was restricted. I was on a restriction. Yeah, the things you do.
Now, pro tip about budgeting: if you're going to a reef show like Reefapalooza or one of the events, if you buy coral on the last day, it's usually cheaper because people don't want to lug home all that coral. So you should get better deals if you're trying to like stretch it. Now, you might not have as good of a selection because all like the primo stuff's probably sniped the day before. But if you're not crazy picky, usually you can make better deals, especially if you want multiple things. Pro tip.
Also, if you're on a budget, taking the cash that you want to spend out, and when that cash is gone, the spending is over, is a good thing to try. We tried to do budgets a couple of times with the tank, and we just realized it was better to pretend that it doesn't exist and deal with it later. But yeah, and my husband has hobbies, and he's the exact same way, and he probably spends way more on his hobbies than he probably should. And we were joking recently that I probably have finally surpassed his hobby expenditures recently.
Do you know what else is
So,
funny?
yeah.
Like, all hobbies are relative. Like, I'll be like, what? It's that much for like this felt pen? Like, what are Copic markers? Like, those things are bananas. I'm like, for a pen? And she's like, it's like, how much you spend on a coral? I'm like, fair point. So I've come to the realization that any single hobby out there is going to have the cheap end and then the crazy end and everything in the middle. So fish
Do you
tanks are no
guys-
different.
My father,
Do you guys
my
notice that?
father-in-law does race cars,
Mhm.
and he has a Shelby Cobra. He has some other car that's being built currently by yet somebody who's a famous person, and some other kind of car. That's that's very expensive.
Sounds like
And my mother and
it. Sounds like it.
yeah. And my mother-in-law builds doll houses, which you wouldn't think would be expensive, but like those things are so intricate. She's always on like eBay and like trying to snipe things, and yeah, all hobbies have expenses.
Yeah.
Do you guys notice that when you get your BRS packages, there's no prices on the invoices in the boxes? They just give you a list of what's in the box.
Strategy.
No, I didn't know that.
Mm.
Smart.
Hmm.
I think a lot of us would have a lot of more answering to do if
If that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think when I brought, not these, but this is how I knew my wife was connected. I brought, I think I had Radions, and one she was like, those are Radions? Those are $800 ones? I was like, someone's been doing some research.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so Farm Frags, hide the receipt. I always see that meme floating around. It's like $5 extra for like the receipt where you want me to make up the prices or whatever. That one is.
yeah, you know what? When I used to buy some stuff from Marine Depot actually did that, and I think Marine Depot is the one that started with no invoice. Like, actually, there was an option to don't include invoice, but I think they just started doing it by default because I think, if you're just keeping track of stuff, you realize like there were a lot of returns because spouse found out. There was also someone I used to buy from. I don't know if it's Aqua Cave. I don't remember someone, but I was buying from someone and there was literally, you could pay, and I did this, but you could pay to put whatever was on the invoice. You could put, it was like $1 or $2 where you could write in the value on the invoice. And the guy had a big message that says, this does not affect if you're returning or exchanging something. We know the price of it. This is just the price you want to put in the box. So,
That's funny. There was another site that I remember that I used to order stuff from, Hobby King, and you could pick the value of the receipt. It's like, do you want 100%, 70%, 50%? It was like a drop down. That was probably
That's
for
so
like
funny.
shipping and customs. I'm assuming why they did it, but it just made me laugh that they're like, oh, what percentage is your receipt do you want it to be? It was like the weirdest thing.
Fish Street does that. They sell a lot of Jabo stuff.
Yep.
They sell a lot of Jabo and Coral Box stuff, and I think they do it for customs reasons. I don't think it affects us here in the U.S., but you can choose, like, it's free. Like, what do you want on the receipt? Do you want full value, half value, 25%, custom?
Yeah.
And you just put $10.
Yeah. That's funny.
I made a joke. I said, in the next year, everything's going to be double the price anyway, so might as well buy it now.
Probably. Everything in life is going up lately. It's nuts.
That is true.
What's saving?
Yeah. What is the saving?
Saving
needs
to
be
buy
good?
it more expensively later.
Yeah. It's a dangerous slope.
One of the things that I was saying beforehand, and we kind of touched on it a little bit too, is like supporting your spouse's hobbies as well. That was something before I got into the hobby, and I didn't have a real hobby, right? I had a newborn kid. I was this wife. Like, my identity was like not exactly what I would have liked it to be. So having the hobby for me allowed me to have this space that was just mine. And so if your spouse doesn't have a hobby, potentially supporting them in developing something like that might be a good way to get some support back.
No, that makes sense. It's a good one. And if there is anything to, like, figure out what they're interested in, encourage it, right? So it goes both ways.
Yep.
It's easier when you each have your own obsessions and not
So, Brandy, you just said that. You let me realize that I have two group of friends. I have the fishy friends, and then I have the before reefing or the non-reef friends. So
The BR and
When's
the
last
AR.
time you talked to your non-reefing friends?
just a couple still straggling every now and again. Interesting. I wonder if anyone else noticed that, like, you have pre-reef and post-reef.
Mm-hmm. I do have a lot of friends that have made straight from reefing though, so for sure, like tons of people. Most reefers are good people, so.
Bert says my brother uses his hobby to get away from his wife.
Dun dun dun. The tank's probably not in the living room.
I mean, that's something that like me and my husband have talked about, right? Like, it's not good if they have an unhealthy relationship, but you don't necessarily need to be doing everything together. And one thing that I noticed very quickly, me being a female in a mainly male hobby, is that when my husband went with me to things, the people would talk to my husband and not to me. And my husband doesn't care at all. You've seen it. Oh, he could care less. And we were talking to some company, and the guy kept turning and talking to my husband, and my husband would back away and try and like face him towards me, and he's
like, I don't care, talk to her.
Past me. Yeah. And my husband was like, well, I'm not the customer, she is, and I think you just made her so mad you're not going to buy anything. She's not going to buy anything. You just lost the customer. So like having those separations, I think, can be incredibly healthy. Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily that your spouse needs to do the hobby with you. Like there might be things that y'all enjoy doing together, but it doesn't mean that you have to force them to do the thing with them. Like I don't like to hunt. I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. to go hunting. I'm not going to do that with my husband. If he's always asking me to do it, I'm going to find it annoying. So, I think it's totally okay if your spouse doesn't want to do it with you.
Yeah, for sure. But
I don't force them, but it's like I ask my kids to feed, and it's sort of like a chore, and they feed. They overfeed, but that's just part of, I love getting the family involved. I don't force them. Like, my kids are at the point now where they used to love coming to Reefapalooza with me. And then last year, I was kind of hurt. I made up T-shirts that said Reefing with O. We had Reefing with O T-shirts. We were supposed to go all matching.
I wore your shirt.
Dang.
Yeah, they didn't want to go. So, maybe they're at that point now where they're, growing out of it. But that's cool, though. They still help me.
Own things too, right?
Yeah, they still help me. If I'm in a pinch, they're like, hey, they do feed. Sometimes when I come home and I'm rushing home to feed, it's like, Dad, I took care of that. Don't worry about it. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. It's a tricky one, but I don't know. I think there is value if you do find good ways to get them involved. I mean, obviously not required, but supporting each other in each hobby is definitely important, for sure. Yep, exactly.
That's all that I had on my list, and I was writing things down as we were going.
Don't leave the ROD on and flood the floors. Who's done this in the early days of reefing?
Early days.
Yeah.
After 4 or 5 times, I finally learned my lessons and only put float valves on everything now.
Everything. Every container has a float valve. Yes. If I don't have a float valve, then I drag the thing to the sink or to the shower. Mm-hmm. And then I usually fall asleep anyway and just, wake up hours later in a panic. But
oh my God. My RDI station used to be in the master bathroom, and I would sit the container in the tub so that way when it overflowed, it went down the tub. And I have no idea how many gallons of water I wasted by not realizing it was overflowing.
Yeah.
But at least it was into the drain.
So float valves, 10 or 15 bucks, drill a hole, put a float valve with a push connect on it. Save you a lot of headaches later. Now the other super useful option is that Flood Guardian. Also a huge fan of that. So it's a solenoid with an optical sensor, so you can just clip it on whatever you want. That works really well too. And some things I use that and a float valve on, just that double layers. But yeah, definitely goes a long way having a float valve.
Redundancy.
worthy investment.
Yep. And so what I do now, I feel comfortable like just leaving, even at night when you need water, you can just plug it in and just leave it because the pressure switch.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So if you're using your ODI, make sure it has an auto shutoff valve, which is a little box with 4 tubes in it. So it's your product water goes through it, and then I don't know if it's your waste, your other water goes through it. But when it senses back pressure, it basically closes that little valve inside and stops the flow through it. So that should be on every RODI. I don't know why they even sell them without it, because I think that's super important. But having that on it is 100% necessity in my mind.
One thing this is a different conversation, so I'll ask that later. Never mind.
No.
Yeah, what do you got?
My booster pump sometimes comes back on after the RODI has shut off.
Mm-hmm.
Even so, I think that there's something going on with my pressure. Because the booster pump will turn off, the RDI will turn off. I don't know what order they turn off because I'm never in there. But then the booster pump later on, apparently the pressure drops back, and the booster pump comes back on.
Okay.
For like a second and then turns back off?
No, like a little bit later.
Oh.
So there is an auto shutoff for your RDI unit, which will stop flow through it. Now the booster pump also has a pressure valve on the outside of it. And now there is a little tiny screw in there, so you might just have to adjust that to be a smidge more sensitive. That's probably all it will take to fix that. So it should be super easy. Just tighten that screw a little bit, and I think you'll be good.
All right, perfect.
Yep.
Good to know.
Interesting.
Bert, I fill up my RO drinking water by unplugging the DI and forget that too. Overflow jugs. Okay. Put in a T for before the DI. Take your RO from there, and then I guess for the jugs, depends how you're filling it. But I would T into it before the DI because that's like better tasting water because it's not completely stripped of everything. But yeah, now a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll get those little piggy tanks for the RO systems that generally go under sinks that gives that instant pressure, and then T that before the DI, and then just use like a little spigot valve or whatever, and you'll have your always on gallon or 2 of water ready to roll.
I think BRS sells like a drinking water kit or something that's made just for that. I think I've seen it on the website before.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Robbie, my floods happen when transferring my RODI container to my salt mixing container. 100% to get a little pump with a hose to do it for you. Don't do it manually, because I would spill in the same thing. So I have a little P-mump thing there that literally goes from one container to the container beside it with its own flow valve. So I can literally be like, fill it up, and then it will just happen. It's not the speediest thing in the world, but it does the job, and there's nothing to spill.
I have a pump that goes from my saltwater container that I use whenever I do water changes, and my biggest issue is tripping over that cord and it coming out of the tank and water going everywhere. And sometimes I don't realize that immediately.
On the Python, they have that little like hook thing. That is a lifesaver.
I have that. I've never hooked it up. Yeah, I know. It's in my little container.
That is the best. But that, even for like refilling it,
where it is.
That is the best thing ever, because if you're refilling it, you literally just hook it on the side, and then it doesn't fall off. It's beautiful.
Yeah,
so there was one time when I had 20-gallon container. You know those containers from Home Depot that have like, they're black, they're kind of flat, and then it has the yellow top?
You betcha.
I think I was using one I used to use one as my mixing container, and I think it was a 20-gallon one.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't realize I had moved my seat and put the container there, so my wife and her best friend were here. And I thought the chair was there, but I ended up sitting in the 20-gallon. That broke. I live in an apartment, so you can imagine my downstairs was not happy about that, so yes.
Dang, that sucks.
Quite worse than... Maybe it's not worse. It's like sitting on a toilet and then the toilet overflowing. Like, oh my God, worst of the worst.
Yeah.
That's gonna be trickier in an apartment. Like, that's a lot more detrimental to deal with if you're leaking through the floor.
Float valves. Like float valves. Like, do not take any risks.
In the container.
Dang, that's crazy.
Those are cool. Yeah.
That's so funny.
So yeah, float valves.
Carpet got destroyed. So yeah, that too.
Having a carpet shampooer to suck up the moisture, or a shop vac definitely helps. If you spill salt water on the carpet, again, carpet shampooer, because I've seen, if too much salt water gets on there, they don't do it, it gets like crustier, like from the salt. So shampooing it after is your friend.
I heard the bucket head, thing from Home Depot where that's like a lifesaver.
Mm-hmm. They're cheap too. They're only like $20 or $30 or something.
$24 is $24, and then you pay like $4 for the bucket.
So next year they're going to be $48. So if you want one, go get it now.
As with everything in the world.
Someone said nightmare neighbor. So when I was doing auto water changes, I used to pump the water out the window. So my windows this is like a back alley. No one walks there. If you know New York City, there's like back alleys. No one goes there. So I used to pump. So if I'm doing a water change, and I'm just saying this, no one knows where I live. If I'm doing a water change, Dev, and it's raining, I just pump the water out the window, dude. So you can't, like, obviously, if it's
they'll be like, these raindrops are salty.
If it's a calm night like tonight and someone's pumping 40 gallons out the window, you just hear water. Obviously, someone's going to be curious and look. But if it's raining and it's a back alley,
you're pretty safe.
Yeah. I think I'm good.
Now, is that any less effort than just putting it down the drain?
You're asking the wrong question.
I guess the window's physically closer, so.
Yeah, you just you literally just so I have lines. I think I got this idea from you, Dev, where I have it lined off where it's like if I'm doing a 5-gallon water change, it's this line 10, 20. So I know if I'm doing a 20-gallon water change, so I just put the pump at a certain level and just stand there and watch. It's a C-shaped pump, so it goes pretty fast, especially when it's pumping 4 feet. There's no head pressure, so it's just.
Yeah. Huh. Nice. Do completely random thought, but with your RODI wastewater, when I was in Louisiana, I did a tank video with him. Jerry, his tank. He had a huge pond in his yard, and his RODI fed his. Or no, that was Brendan's tank. But it basically was his auto top off for his pond outside. I was like, oh, that's a really good use for it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's super cool.
Bert said something, and it reminded.
He has like a 500-gallon tank or something.
Like
he had a big tank, so yeah, an outdoor pond.
Ponds evaporate.
Yeah, water does that. Air, sun.
Bert said something that reminded me of a really dumb mistake I made the very first time I did a water change on my salt tanks. My freshwater tank, I used to always take the dirty water and put it in my plants for like the fertilization and everything. And without thinking about it, I did that the first time with my saltwater tank and killed a bunch of plants because salt water isn't good for plants. And it took me a little bit to realize why they all died. So that's a real story.
What was freshwater into the plants? Didn't do well?
Freshwater into the plants is great, but whenever I did a water change with my salt water and put the dirty salt water in the plant, I didn't even think about it. I was just like, so this is how I normally do it. And
I used to do, before reefing, I was into the planted tanks, and I dosed all the fertilizers and stuff to the tank. So I actually took that water. I'm like, this is good water, and I'd use it for plants. So I was curious. Salt water, not so much, though. Salt water will kill a lot of plants. Apparently people use it to kill weeds and stuff.
Yeah. Well,
there you go.
Wasn't my brightest moment, but good to share the fact that I make a lot of terrible decisions. I was a plant murderer. I felt terrible.
Yeah, we all make these. Yeah, I think we all do. We all have done some dumb stuff to some extent.
We have all had life lessons.
Nice way of putting it.
Brain farts is a phrase for a reason, and I have a lot of them. But my brain just is not caught up to. My body is doing something, and my brain is not paying attention to what my body is doing.
Yeah.
Like when I first got a reef tank, I was topping it off with salt water.
What?
Ooh.
When I first got a reef tank, I didn't realize. No one. I was topping off with salt water, so that went downhill pretty fast.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I thought my tank was, well, before I even got to that point, I thought the tank was leaking because every few days it'd be sucking water. So, the guy who told me about reef tanks didn't tell me about this whole evaporation thing. So I thought my tank was leaking. So, yeah, it was, I was hunting down a leak for weeks. And then when I learned about this whole top off thing.
So for anybody new, freshwater evaporates, salt does not. So yeah, definitely only top off with RODI.
Someone on Reef to Reef early on, digging with Cruzy, said that's why I have no grass in my backyard. Someone on Reef to Reef ages ago had an issue similar, and they're like, I everything's dying where I'm putting my water out. I'm like, well, it's because of the salt. And I felt good that other people had not made that same connection that I made initially, that salt is lethal to plants that don't grow near or in the ocean.
Yeah.
That is true.
This is very true.
One thing I've learned tonight is that our spouses are very accommodating to our hobby.
We do have good spouses.
It is true. Yeah, it is true. We definitely have. I have an amazing husband. Y'all don't have. I was going to say we have amazing husbands. Y'all don't have amazing husbands.
I don't have an amazing husband, but I have a wonderful wife, and she's writing amazing notes for me, which I actually appreciate. So really good points. If you have extra disposable income, I mean, have at her. But if you're, pushing it between the two of you budgeting for things, you should probably not be spending hundreds of dollars on a coral. And if there is, make sure you have a budget for that fund that you can allocate to things. And that is a big one. If you have to lie about it, you probably already know something needs to change. So yeah, if you're hiding it, then there's probably an issue. But I mean, if you have your own fund, or if you can barter stuff, like I trade coral and stuff all the time. Usually if there's something someone has I want, I'm like, hey, what do you want? I'll trade you something. Like, I love the barter system because then I get new stuff without spending money. So it's a great way to do it.
Hey, if anybody needs any help with anything, I will work for Coro, food and equipment, just saying.
Perfect. See, barter system's a good way to go. It really is. Shop sale items, barter. Allocate spendings for fun. Yeah, so you definitely do need your fun fund. Another thing I do too, if you like side things for money to whatever, then use that for the fun fund. And avoid, the day job money if possible. It's always a good way to go.
Yeah, that reminds me also, just like you have allocations for money, there should also be allocations for time.
Oh, very true.
Time is almost at this point in my life, time is more valuable than my money because I have less time than I have of anything else. And so making sure you also have allocations of time to spend with your spouse is really important.
That the spouse tank time budget should be greater than the tank time budget for a successful long-term relationship.
Yeah,
for sure. That's a very good point, though. Very good point.
Thanks. Sometimes I have a good one.
You're full of good ones.
Oh, thanks.
That is true. I've tried, one of my resolutions this year was to try to spend less time messing around with it, just doing random stuff, and try to save it. I'm always messing with my tank. This is just what I do. I like it. I'm not apologizing for that. But I've at least tried to not do the everyday messing with, tinkering. Just save it for maybe every 2 weeks you do a project. I think it just takes less time that way, where you just, you might be able to combine a few projects together instead of just, you're tinkering with the lights today, and then tomorrow you're tinkering with pumps, and the next day you're tinkering with the skimmer. Just save it until you're doing a water change that you're maybe waiting for the water to get pumped back in, or you're waiting to pump it out the window. Then you just kind of mess around with skimmer.
Yeah, well, that's fair. Grouping stuff rather than 20 minutes here, there. Group it to like an hour or two once a week, and then especially those bigger maintenancey things. That's a good way to go.
True.
Yep. Anyone going to Aquatics Expo? Not that I know of. Is that the Seattle one? I feel
I
like
think
it
that's
is,
the
but I'm
one
not
at
sure.
Atlanta, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I've been. This is actually something. The Aquatic Expo, the fresh and saltwater show. I think that's different than the aqua. No, okay. The Aquatic Experience is the one that was in Chicago and then was in New York for a few years. That's different than the Aquatic Expo.
Mm-hmm.
Two different shows.
Sounds legit.
Uh,
I don't know where Aquatic Expo is.
Aquatic Expo is from Magna.
Hmm.
Oh,
from
okay. I'm
the
thinking
Aquatic.
about going to that. There's also something this weekend in Charleston.
Mm-hmm.
Reef. I don't think it's Reef Dreams, but something like that.
Yeah. That was in Atlanta. Is
What's
there any coral in your tanks that you're worried about, and what is it? My Goniopora is currently attacking my red planet. So that would be the one. I need to frag off that chunk that's like RTNing so that the rest of it is still fine and doesn't progress, so the rest can grow back. Oh, on a side note, if you have a coral that is RTNing or S-tanning, one thing I've done is I've like chopped off the affected part, but you know, have a good 1/4 inch buffer between the good stuff and then put a little bead of super glue around it. And my experience is for the most part stopped it. And then later on, it will kind of grow back over. So I had my Fox Flame, same thing, where it was like RTNing. I had no idea what was going on. So I fragged off the middle chunk. Now the outside, and super glued that little edge. Now the outside edges are growing back over to the middle. And Gold Slinger, holy crap, thank you so much for the super chat. Welcome back.
I think he just does it
Sorry
for a
about that.
reaction.
Probably.
My kids were sorry. Had to go handle something with the kiddos.
Welcome back. Were they working on the tank for you?
I would hope not. I think everything went off at this point in the night. Oh, my Kessel is still on. It shouldn't be.
Dun dun dun. Now, yes.
You were talking about the STN and then the RTNing thing.
Yes.
Sorry.
Oh, yeah. So frag off the dying part where you're still good, like have a little 1/4 inch buffer, and that for the most part, or put a little super glue around the little edge, and that for me, that's worked on a few corals now. So I've been staring at my red planet that's slowly going further, thinking every day I should do this soon. But yeah, so Gonioporas are not friends with Acropores.
All right. So
My,
since I have a when you're finished, I have a coral question.
Ask away, good sir.
I know we have a group chat with us going. I literally just texted something to our group chat. I think I have something bacterial, I'm gonna say, going on. So I have this white. I don't know what that is. It looks like a nudibranch, but it's not. It starts from the base of my SPS a lot of times, and like it's almost like something is eating it. Yes, that's a chalice. And I have these white things. I don't know what they are. They just peel off. They're not live animals, but it's been happening. Like I haven't been able to keep any Montipora alive for more than 5 or 6 months.
Huh.
I have no idea what that is, and it just things will go well for a while, and I think something might.
Are you only losing Montipora?
For a while I was, but now that's a chalice.
So okay.
And then I see that the base of some acros.
My initial thought was that looks like a sponge to me, but that also looks like a nudibranch, little spines.
It's not alive. It's not alive.
Sponges are alive.
No, not the nudibranch. That's not a nudibranch.
Yeah.
It looks like that's what I thought it was, a nudibranch, but it's not alive.
Mm-hmm.
At least I don't think. You know what? It is alive, but what I mean, it's not. It doesn't move. I would imagine a nudibranch would walk around, move around. I wish we could show the people here a photo somehow. I don't know, Dev, if you could do some magic.
Which photo? The one I just showed to everybody? I already showed everybody.
You held it up to the,
Yeah.
You held it up to the camera.
Yeah, I can do it again.
Oh.
To me, it screams sponge, but
It screams sponge. Is it because the sponge is maybe the coral is just losing coral from the base,
It's all
and
backwards.
it's just I'm losing coral from the base. That is a big chalice, like a really nice chalice. I would hate to lose it. Maybe I'm just losing coral from the base, and the sponge is just living or feeding off of whatever the tissue is dying.
It's possible, but yeah, like I don't know. To me, that looks like a sponge. Yeah, it doesn't quite look like the nudibranch things. Like when you said Monty's only, my first thought was Monty eating nudibranchs. I have had those.
David said a bacteria colony.
The same
that's
bacteria.
a bacteria collar.
So I would probably take it out and give it like a 50-50 peroxide dip for like a minute or two to kill off any bacteria. That's probably what I would do in that scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah, David.
50-50 peroxide and water.
Yeah, or you could do less if you want to do it longer, but I would probably do something like that, like tank water, and then, like 20 to 50% peroxide, pop it in for a minute or two, then take it out, because that's going to be like an antibacterial, right? It's going to take a lot of the stuff out.
So what David is saying, I lost chalice and other corals. Yeah, that's what I'm experiencing now. It's sort of like brown jelly but white. Very similar, yeah. Huh. He said, I wonder, David, if I guess I'll message you on Instagram and just see if, I don't know, maybe what you did, or if you can just post it in the chat. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm battling now. It used to be just Monty. So for a while, I've always said, hey, I can't keep Monty's. But now I'm seeing that at the base of some of my colonies and then some of my chalice, which...
Now, have they been receding, though?
Smell it.
Yes.
Okay, fair.
How do you differentiate it from the regular fish smell?
Smell something that's not that, and smell something that is that. I don't know.
Sniff some coffee beans, then sniff the...
No, how would you know it's not a fish or a copepod or a... I don't know.
Well, I'm assuming if the bacteria would probably have a not great smell, potentially.
I don't know. Just smell some stuff and report back after.
Oh.
What is it supposed to smell like, David?
Yeah, exactly. Overdosing supplements.
Yeah, that is something I've actually stopped doing. Like, it's just...
Okay.
I wasn't even dosing, like, amino acids. I had stopped that for a while. So I am doing... It's just a calcium reactor, and that's it.
Okay, so Than, Tidal Gardens, bacteria infection smells like a corpse. So if you know what a corpse smells like, there's your favorite reference.
That's what I meant when I said not great.
Yeah.
Do you know what I don't know what a... Oh, okay.
Well, have you ever smelled a dead animal? That's a corpse.
Oh. Right.
So.
Yeah. So, I don't know. David says take it out so it doesn't spread. If you want to keep it, I would try doing the peroxide dip. Or the stream I did a few weeks back with Chummingham's Reef. He had a big dipping procedure that he did if he had stuff that was receding for LPS, and it was part of it was the antibacterial peroxide, but there's also a bunch of other stuff that he did. So that might be worth a watch, and then try that process on it.
You know what? Right, you're right. A lot of my stuff is sort of really encrusted, and I was thinking though of just cutting everything off the base, putting them on, when you get aquacultured frags, Dev, it comes on a little like piece of rock, round piece of rock, something like that. I was thinking of cutting everything off the base, dip everything, but then putting them back like on semi-permanent plugs, where if I need to do the dipping procedure again, they're easily removed. Like maybe just use a dab of glue to attach them to the rock, but they're on. That's literally what I was thinking of doing. I was considering that.
Now, the other option, if you have a coral saw or know somebody with a coral band saw, is frag off the whole perimeter of death and take your nice coral frag in the middle, give it like an iodine dip, and then put it back in. Now, that's another potential strategy.
Mm-hmm. But I think I might just do like cut them off, change the rocks, and then do something. Which that brings me up on I know we're off topic now. A question I have for Brandy. Out of all that rock we saw at Rep Chicago, which was your favorite?
Aqua Rocher.
Yeah, that's what I thought you were going to say that, and that was the most interesting to me also.
It's the one I thought to take a video of. Actually, I didn't take the video. Peter, Bay Area Reef, was the one who, because I was like freaking out over it because I thought it was the coolest thing ever. He was like, let's take a video. So, yeah. I love the Aqua Rocher stuff. It's so cool.
It's like where you can like puzzle piece it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm gonna spill the beans. Really give you guys a sneak peek. Art Reef Rocks is building me a custom aquascape, and I told him to build me something cool for this tank. And check this out. I'm super stoked for it. It's all
No way.
it's all like floating, those
That
little acrylic
is
rods. So I'm
awesome.
super excited for it.
And it doesn't have like the flat shelf because I think that's what.
And frag holes. So you just pop stuff in. It's super
Oh,
cool.
I love it.
Isn't it amazing? I literally said I was talking to them, and they're like gonna build something. I'm like, just make me something awesome. And look, yeah, there's even like pre-drilled holes you can like pop in frags and stuff. Like it's so cool. I'm super excited for it. So
That's what I need to do.
that's what's
I
gonna
love
redo that one later.
That's brilliant.
So,
The
but yeah,
pre-drilled holes is absolutely brilliant.
Not cool, Dev. Not cool.
dude,
No,
so
it is
cool.
cool.
That
I
is
know
like,
it's cool. I'm just jealous, so I'm saying not cool.
yeah, sorry, but yeah. So that's a sneak peek. I'm super excited for it. Shipping for it from the Philippines is gonna be bananas because that's where it was custom made. But it's gonna
Oh my
be
God.
amazing. I'm super stoked for it.
Hashtag
Wow.
like it.
By the way, that
Yeah.
is so cool though. The frag plugs like is really, you can put stuff in and just see where it goes best.
Yep.
Wow.
I was like, at first, I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit worried because normally I spend like weeks doing crazy aquascapes and it takes me ages. And I was like, hey, just make me something awesome, see what happens. He showed me some stuff he made for his own tank. I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's cool. That's cool. And then I was like, okay. So I gave my idea what I liked, and then yeah, so I'm super stoked. So that was my sneak peek photo I got the other day. So I'm like, yes.
Do you know anyone in the U.S. that does stuff like that?
No, they have, because you were mentioning Aqua Rocher, that popped into my head. They have a similar thing where they have like the Lego stuff, right? Where you can like put in chunks of the
The
aquascape.
stacks.
Yeah, and they sell that
that's
stuff
two
out.
little fishies, right?
Nope.
Yes, that's-
Art Reef Rocks, same one that built that for me. They have that,
Oh, okay.
and I think they're in California, and they sell that stuff there. But the custom one, they made it like overseas. But yeah, so anyways, that very similar thing. It's super cool because it's like Lego bricks. You just like poke in, like, oh, I want another rock here. Like I don't know if they use little rods and pre-drilled things in the rocks, but you can just like change it, which is neat.
Yeah, the Aqua Rocher has pre-drilled rods, and it also has like these elbow type things, which I just think is absolutely incredible. And I feel like would make fragging so easy if a colony gets too big and just take
pull
out
that chunk of
stick and-
rock.
yeah,
Yeah. No, it is cool,
makes
right?
encrusting corals better,
Because like
easier to.
this tank
Control.
stuff is stacked. I could pull out a rock. My other tank, it is all cemented together. Like you cannot pull it out. Like you can,
Yeah.
but not fully. Like I glued two or three rocks maximum. So maybe like an arm of the aquascape comes out. But just having that like Lego ability is pretty cool.
Yeah.
I saw, I really like the Aqua Rocher stuff with the stacking and stuff like that. One thing I saw Mike Paletta do like years ago is he had a softy tank. And I think when he first set up the tank to make it look full, so basically he put like a rod in the middle, like fiberglass rod, and then put stacked rocks on top of it. Then he put corals in it. And as the corals grew, he would just take layers off to lower it to just give them more room to grow. So I thought that was cool. And
That
I
is
thought
smart.
of that when I saw the Aqua Rocher. I immediately thought of that. I was like, hey, you can start with a minimalist aquascape, and when you've grown that out, you sort of, I think Terrence from Neptune said he does that too, where he just takes like some
With Tonga
rock
branch. Because
Yes.
his is all Tonga. He's like, oh yeah, just jabbing a branch random somewhere and I have more space. I'm like, that definitely has an appeal there.
yeah.
I think last month on my club meeting, we were talking about Cephestrias. David was telling me that I needed to get rid of my Cephestrias because they were going to encrust and spread everywhere. And I feel like things like that is one way to deal with those corals that do encrust like crazy and become problematic. Just take it out, the rock it's on, and re-add it. Like I
Yeah.
can always
That
update it.
that is a big advantage, right? Or you're like, oh, I'm out of coral space. You're like, oh, there's a little hole, add in another arm coming off or something. Like, then you're like,
Yeah.
boom, more coral space.
Yeah.
Like that has a cool appeal
Yeah.
to it. Where in an established tank, it's a lot trickier to do that. Like Terrence is with the Tonga. I mean, Tonga's fairly easy to just poke somewhere, but for the average rock, it's a lot harder to do.
Yeah,
So-
my aquascape and my big tank downstairs is all glued together. So if I ever have to take anything out for fragging, it's going to be a nightmare. I didn't think that through very well.
Yep, gotta do what you gotta do sometimes.
Yep.
No.
But-
Okay.
I've
All
had
right,
it.
I got some ideas.
Yeah. Do tell.
No, Aqua
Oh.
Roche. I'm actually looking at Aqua Roche, but you guys are all feeding me ideas. I'm absorbing the ideas.
Reverse osmosis it into you. So yeah, definitely some pretty cool stuff. I'm stoked for the new scape that's going to be going in here. The whole floaty thing I think is going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that look.
No, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of it, but yeah, there's like little acrylic support rods on certain spots so they can do like these big crazy overhangs, and with it being in the shadowy, I don't even think you'll see it, so it'll be kind of cool.
I have an acrylic rods, and I have multiple acrylic rods going through mine because I wanted the overhangs, which is why it's going to be a pain in the butt if I ever need to take anything apart, because the acrylic rods are glued in and like epoxy in
Yeah.
and mortared in. Like there is no removing it.
Do either of you do YouTube videos currently?
I'm supposed to be doing them. I have much recorded that I don't know when in the heck I'm going to edit.
Okay.
You know what, Dev?
Pourquoi?
I am going to probably start again.
Okay.
It's probably going to be really simple, like stuff. Yeah, man. When I look at what you guys are doing, I'd rather watch than create because I don't think I have anything to add to the conversation. Like when I look at you and Fan, and it's production value is way. I feel like I'd be coming in and like scraping the bottom of the barrel in terms of value add and production value. So, but time
like
was
the
a
videos
factor
I
for a while.
You know what? I still will film a video on my phone once in a while. For the most part, I use like the nice camera, but every once in a while, I'll just like do a phone video. And most people probably don't even notice. So, I mean, production value is nice, but as long as the content's good and the audio's good, you're pretty good. No excuses. That's pretty much the moral of the story.
My issue is the editing.
Yeah.
Just like editing podcasts, right? Like, when in the heck do you find time for the editing? I'm like, I'll just pay someone to do it. I'm like, I don't, like I said, my time is, at this point in my life, I have more money than I have time. Not that I have a whole lot of money, but my time is non-existent.
Yeah, I feel you. That is definitely the struggle, especially with like multiple hobbies and hobbies about your hobbies.
Yeah. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
True.
Yep.
Why? Why'd you ask?
Who asked?
You asked. Dev.
What would I ask? Oh, in the
You asked-
sorry, in the chat, Digging with Cruz says, "What are your guys' YouTube channels?" You're on mine, so you know which mine is.
Oh.
The plan is to
I
turn
missed that
this. Yeah, the plan is to turn this into a podcast as well. So I have been asked to turn my live streams into a podcast for a bazillion years, and then the three of us decided we'd start a podcast. So we actually have recorded a bunch that we have yet to edit and put out. But, once a month or so, we've also been doing like a live stream video one for fun as well, just to mix it up. So in the future, at some point in time, once we actually get around to editing them, we will also have these ones plus additional ones that we do on the side for a podcast. So it's coming. It's in the works. It just needs to be edited.
True. Fan says YouTube is really challenging to be consistent at.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. I like Fan's YouTube channel. I like the pacing. The information is easy to absorb because of the pacing. And then I think, I think he's done I like Becca on Fan's channel, to be honest. Like, it's a change of pace.
Yeah. Brandy said this is my YouTube channel. Official ReefDudes now. All right.
No, the name. Sure, I'll be a reef student too, but
I've had, yeah, I've been asked so many times. They're like, "Who's the other dude in ReefDudes?"
How did you come up with the name?
That's a story for another day. But I'll tell you
I
later.
was about to say me or Dev.
Well,
You did tell us.
Okay, let's start with you.
Yeah, you did
Let's
tell
start
us, but tell us again.
For me?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a quote that old baseball coach made that said, "Be a fountain, not a drain." Like, don't be a jerk. Put more good out than you do bad. And everybody calls me B, so I said letter B, the fountain. Shower drain. It's not that like
Deep, very deep.
yeah.
It is. It is.
It is deep.
Well, it was just kind of like a quote sitting in front of me, and I was like, I can do that. And fountain sounds watery. I don't know.
You're a bundle of energy too, so it kind of works, right? You're putting in lots of good stuff. Good vibes.
Thanks.
I like it.
I try.
You succeed. You do well.
I'm going to start blushing.
Yes. I like that. That is a good story.
It is good.
Put more reefing good out in the world, not so much negativity. I like it.
Yeah, it's solid.
Be reefing good. That sounds fun to me for some reason. Okay. I want to know, what about yours, Dev?
Okay, so actual story is I planned on doing this with a buddy. That's why we ended up coming with ReefDudes. And then he bailed because he had kids and everything and didn't have time. So I'm like, whatever. I already bought the domain name. I'm rolling with it. And then I just kept it. So.
Oh, I never thought about it.
Yeah.
That's why you're the other dude.
Well, that's why it's ReefDudes. But I have always had plans of doing like a really funny video, but which might happen one day. But do like a green screen where there's two of me in it, just to like mess with people. So one day when I have some free time, it might happen. But it could be funny.
You have a Dev 1 and a Dev 2 t-shirt.
I don't know. I have some ideas for something funny. So one day, but this will require a lot of free time of editing and making multiple. But one day I'll do something good about it.
That'll be funny.
Yeah.
How'd you come up with your name, O?
Oh, my name. My name starts with an O, and I was reefing with O.
Short and sweet, buddy. Short and sweet.
I think I had. Did I have a name before?
Your real name?
That was it.
Who am I before reefing?
I don't. No. I had a name. I have no idea. I think I had use my real name, or it was like O Seymour or something to that effect. And I was like, let me reefing with O. And then I debated doing one word or two words, and I decided to just separate it for, I don't know.
That's
well,
fair.
For Reef to Reef, my username was B Lee, which is B for Brandy and Lee for my middle name, which is Lee. And it looked kind of like Bleh.
I thought it was Blay. No, I always say Blay.
Lee. Yeah, I didn't realize right away that I just was like B Lee. And so whenever I started my Instagram account, I was like, I need to do something better than Bleh.
So, Brandy, I know you know this, but you can probably change your name in rare instances on Reef to Reef.
I do know that, but I think everybody knew me so well by that name that it would have been confusing had I changed my name.
Dun, dun, dun. Who is this new imposter? Yeah, fair. All right, we are so far off topic. Okay, any other pro tips for happy spouse, happy house with the reef tank?
My list currently consists of respect, communication, keeping the living space clean, reduce the noise, be organized, general takeaways.
All the things I struggle with, so that's good.
Looking at you, O.
That's a
We
good
talked
list.
to your wife.
That's
We
a
talked
good
to your
list.
wife before this.
That's fair.
Oh no, Dan.
Yep.
I feel bad. Dan had a cough.
Yeah.
From what was it? Insulation?
Oh, that's a nasty one.
Dust or something? I forget what caused the cough. Somebody was working on something, and I hate coughs. Whenever I get a cough, I can't get rid of them.
The stragglers. Yeah, it was lots of fun. Speaking of insulation, going up through the attic to run all those wires for everything and tubes and.
You have to go up there periodically to change the media in the CO2 scrubber, don't you?
No, not anymore. I did that initially. However, now I have the one that's on top of my skimmer because this winter I got blow-in insulation to like beef up the insulation in my attic. So there's no more going in the attic. You'd be swimming in that stuff. It'd be so not pleasant. So yeah, I'm pretty much cut off from going in the attic now. So it's a good thing. Before that though, But before that, I ran a network cable to my Apex, which was one of my projects I did before this, as well as I ran a power wire for my battery backups for my solar panels to my tank. And I also took out the hose that had the prior CO2 media, and I put in I think I used either an RODI canister or one of the two little fishies media reactors, little phosphine reactor, and I put a 50 micron filter in there, and I just like velcroed it to the rafter, and the input hose is like right at the peak of the attic getting fresh air. So that filter should last stages. But anyway, so that's what I did right before. So now it's going to be a bugger to ever change it. So I'm committed for life. Yep.
All right. Well, that's all I have for. Oh, I didn't write this down. But
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I miss something?
Supporting your spouse's hobbies.
Agreed.
Sorry, I was just thinking about the list of things that I wrote down that we were talking about.
Yep.
Oh, you said oh, so I thought I did something wrong.
Oh, as an OH. An exclamation.
Perfect.
I was making an exclamation.
Yep. So on that note, I have to take our own advice and go give my significant other some love and attention.
I'm getting tired.
Yeah, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. So definitely about that time. So I do appreciate everyone coming on today. It was lots of fun. Goldslinger, holy smokes, thank you very much for the super chat. Shelly, John, Tracy, and Will Emma was last week, but thank you guys so much appreciated, and thank you everyone for coming to hang out today. It's lots of fun.
Oh, always a pleasure.
Thank you guys, had a blast.
All right,
and one of these days we'll get around to editing and actually turn out the audio podcast version.
one day.
One day. All right, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you did, hit that like button. If you're new, make sure you subscribe for future streams, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.
See ya.